John Lennon is someone who needs no introduction. As a member of the Beatles and of the famous Lennon and McCartney songwriting partnership, he would reach the top of the music world and is regarded as one of the best musicians of all time. Born John Winston Lennon on the 9th of October 1940, the son of Julia and Alfred. Alfred was often away as he was a merchant seaman and his mother was staying in Liverpool. John was put into the care of his Aunt Mimi and Uncle George. John would not know his father until he was an adult and a successful musician. John's Uncle George would buy him his first instrument, which was a mouth organ. Upon the death of his Uncle George, John would find out that his mother lived just a short distance away, and he would go and visit her. She would introduce him to rock and roll by playing Elvis Presley records, among other artists. John's mother would also teach him how to play the banjo. She would also buy John his first guitar. John would practice guitar for hours at a time. Tragedy struck when John's mum, Julia, was killed by a car whilst walking home. This event would have a massive effect on John for the rest of his life. John would have many bands before forming the Beatles. Though thrilled when the Beatles rose to stardom, over the years Lennon began to desire a move away from the band as they stopped touring, and he wanted to branch into other creative ventures on his own. After leaving the Beatles, with his second wife Yoko, an artist, he would begin to create somewhat avant-garde music. John would drop the name Churchill and replace it with Ono. John's first solo album was the Plastic Ono Band, which was released in 1970. The album would reach 8 and 6 on the UK and US charts respectively. The album was received well by critics, however the radio-friendly songs that the Beatles made were nowhere to be found on the album, such as Mother, in which John uses primal therapy to vent his thoughts on the relationship with his mother, and Working Class Hero, where John launches an attack on the capitalist class, made it hard for some listeners to get through the album. 1971 saw Lennon release the album Imagine, a softer album with the songs that were easier to listen to and were less raw than the Plastic Ono Band had been. The track Imagine is thought of today as one of the best, according to some, song ever made. As Lennon made plans to record the album Mind Games, Lennon and Ono would break up. This would lead to a year and a half where the couple were not together. During this period, John would get into fights, drink heavily, and abuse May Pang, Yoko's assistant, who had been sent to look after John. John would refer to this period as a lost weekend. John recorded Walls and Bridges, which would be released in 1974. The album would include songs such as Whatever Gets You Through the Night, the classic number 9 Dream. Critics had a mixed reaction to the album, however it would reach 1 on the US Billboard and 6th on the UK album chart. John would help Bowie write the song Fame, which would be Bowie's first number 1 on the US singles chart. 1975 would see the album Rock and Roll released. The album had taken a year to record due to Phil Spector taking the tracks away with him and subsequently being involved in a car accident. It would reach 6th on both the UK and US charts. After 1975, John would take a break from the music industry. His second son had been born and wanted to be there to raise his son, as he had not been around much for his first son Julian, as Julian had been born during the height of the Beatles' success. John would describe himself as a house husband. In 1980, John would release the album Double Fantasy, which would include the tracks Just Like Starting Over and Woman, and would reach number 1 in both the US and the UK. After this album, John started making plans for a new album called Milk and Honey. However, on the 8th of December 1980, John would leave the Dakota building. When a fan approached John asking him to sign a copy of Double Fantasy for him, John would oblige and left to record some material. After recording had ended, John and Yoko would get in their limousine and journey home. It was about 11 p.m. when they walked back to the Dakota building. A voice would call, "Mr. Lennon," and shoot John twice in the back and twice in the shoulder. John was taken to hospital but quickly passed away from his injuries. He was 40 years old.